What's the test when you're looking at an equation? What's the test to see if it has an inverse? What are you looking for? If the x is raised to an even power or an absolute value. So A does not have that problem, right? A, that's raised to an odd power. So it is 1-to-1, which means it has an inverse. You switch your x and y, you solve for the new y. Some of you left it here. You got to keep going. Y has to be completely solved for. Some of you left it here, which means you'll still lose points. You have to replace the y. It is no longer the same equation. You can't leave it that way. We changed this equation by switching the x and y, which is what makes it the inverse. So the only thing that's going to get full credit is that guy. Be really careful. And then B is not 1-to-1, so it doesn't have an inverse. And it said state why not. Read your instructions. If I could teach you nothing else over the course of the next year, it is to please read instructions. Okay, if you just put no on that, I would have docked you points. Don't do that. That's a silly way to lose points, okay? You had to say x can't be raised to an even power. You can't just say it can't be raised to an even power because it's the x that we're looking for. Or you could say it's not 1-to-1. Or some of you said the same y is repeated with a different x. That's fine. All of those mean the same thing. But you have to do the explanation. All right, so first of all, the instructions said to put it in a standard form. One of your questions is going to make you put it in a standard form. So I grouped together the first two terms. I took out the -3. When you take out the -3, it changes the sign on the 11 and puts it over 3. So be careful there. Some of you went wrong there. Then your B is 11/3. Dividing that by 2 and squaring it becomes multiplying by 1/2 and squaring it, which should have been 121/36. Then you're going to add it inside the parentheses. And you're going to, normally you subtract it from outside the parentheses, but we have to multiply by what we took out first, which simplifies, cross cancel, like some of you are dealing with way too big of numbers. Take advantage of the fact that that can cross cancel. And that changes it to a positive 121/12. So then you're adding 121/12 to 4. To factor it, so I change it so it had at least common denominator, it'd be 48/12, and then I'll add it in a second. I'll add those together in a second. To factor it, you keep the -3 in the front, you square root the first term, you square root the last term, you take the sign from the middle, you put it in parentheses and square it, and then 48 plus 121 is 169/12. That is equals to your f of x. So that's the standard form. That alone is a question in itself on your quiz. Put this equation in a standard form and it's going to have fractions, okay? Be careful. If you already had it in standard form and you wanted to find the vertex, you're doing the opposite of what follows x and then the k. So -11/6 and 169/12. Your axis symmetry is x equals -11/6. The domain is all real numbers because it's a parabola. Your range opens down this parabola, so it's -infinity up to 169/12. To find your x-intercepts, you're going to set it equal to 0 and factor it. So -3 times 4 is -12. Factors of -12 that sum to -11 are -12 and 1. Replace your middle term with those two, -12x and x plus 4. I got 4 terms, factor by grouping. From the first one, I took out the -3x. So it should be -3x times x plus 4. And then the x plus 4 is already there. So there's a 1 in front there that's hidden, but it's there. X plus 4 times -3x plus 4 is how that factors. Set it equal to 0, and I get -4 for the first one, and then 1/3 for the second one. Make sure you put these intercepts in coordinate point form. So it's -4, 0, and 1/3, 0. For the y-intercept, anything that's given to you as quadratic is easier to start by going back up to the top and plugging zeros in place of those x's. Have a good weekend, Nathan. So I'd end up getting rid of my x squared and my x term, and I end up with 0, 4. It opens down, so there's a max, and the max is the y coordinate of your vertex, which is 169/12. It may not be that big on your quiz on Monday, but it will be a fraction, okay? When I convert it into a mixed number, I get -1 and 5/6 and 14 and 1/12. So I plotted that point. That's my vertex. I just plotted it above and I labeled it. Obviously, it would go off my graph. And then I plotted the x-intercepts, -4 and positive 1/3, and the y-intercept at 0, 4, and then connect them to make that parabola. All right, so for 3, you want to identify the end behavior by looking at the highest exponent. It was the first one this time. Remember, it doesn't have to be the first. Highest exponent was odd. It's positive. If it's odd and positive, it falls left and rises right. That's your end behavior. To find the zeros, you're going to set it equal to 0. This time it was, you're factoring, so it's got 4 terms. I factor by grouping. Put the parentheses around the first pair and second pair. From the first pair, you can take out an x squared. From the second pair, you can take out a negative 8. And then I get x minus 2 and x squared minus 8. If that 8 was a perfect square, I'd keep going. But if not, we're going to set them equal to 0. And I get x equals 2 and x squared equals 8. So x equals plus and minus the square root of 8. I would approximate it there because you're going to have to graph it. It's pretty close to square root 9, which would be 3. So like a 2.9. But when you write the answers as to what your zeros are, you have to keep it exact and you have to simplify it. So it would be negative square root 2, negative 2 root 2, positive 2 root 2, and then positive 2. And then your y-intercept, you just got to plug 0 in for all those x values. They'll all cancel out, and you'll end up with just 16 at the end. And then the y-intercept, you'll put in coordinate point form, 0, 16. So then I plotted the approximation of the square root 8, which was negative, like a 2.9, positive 2.9, and a positive 2. And then I plotted the y-intercept. It was off the graph. So I drew up above. The end behavior pointed down on the left and up on the right. There's my 0, 16. I knew it had to go up to the 0, 16. I had to know how to cross through all those zeros because none of them had a multiplicity more than 1, okay? Because this is so close, I don't expect you to plot a point in there, but if there's a wide space, you can get a whole number in between there. I need you to plot it to figure out how low to make that little dip. It's so close together, that's not going to go very far, so you don't have to do it, okay? Questions on that one? So that's another one that's got like 4 parts to it. It's going to have more points than the other ones. This last one is not on your quiz on Monday, but it does come back on the test. So this, we're going to do x minus 5, x minus a negative 4 plus root 2, and x minus a negative 4 minus root 2. The minus gets distributed to all the terms, so it changes the signs. And then you're going to, you're going to multiply this out. I would start with the second and the third because we know the square roots are going to cancel. So I got x squared plus 4x plus root 2x plus 4x plus 16 plus 4 root 2. And then I distributed the negative root 2. So negative root 2x, negative 4 root 2, and negative 2. And then anything that has a square root should cancel out. I'm going to bring down the x minus 5. X squared is left. The root 2x and negative root 2x cancel. The 4 root 2 and the negative 4 root 2 cancel. And then you've got to multiply these out. So x times x squared, x to the third, plus 8x squared, plus 14x. And then the negative 5, negative 5x squared, minus 40x, minus 70. Combine your like terms, x to the third, plus 3x squared, minus 26x, minus 70. And then set it equal to the f of x at the end. That's what makes it the actual function. Questions on that one? So again, not on Monday's quiz, but will come back on the test for chapter 2. Yeah. Be careful. First of all, export from classkick because that's a great review. The little share button sends it out. Otherwise, you need the course code to get back in there. The other thing is that you need to do the quiz review. That is not all of what's going to be on your quiz. There is also here's the information about the parabola. You give me the equation, okay? So make sure you do the entire quiz review.